Star Walker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. Hello, fellow gamer. Welcome to episode 166 of Game Master's Journey. I'm your host, Lex Star Walker. On this show, we discuss the craft and the art of game mastering. I've been running RPGs for over 25 years now, and I produce this show in the hopes that you can benefit from my experience, my triumphs, and my mistakes. I've got a great show for you today. Christopher Ruthenbeck is back, and we are discussing West Marches campaigns. So the West Marches style of campaign is a type of campaign that I think you can play with just about any tabletop RPG that features wilderness exploration and player-directed action. Everything from scheduling to party makeup to game session objectives is all up to the players. So I'm really excited to talk about West Marches today. I've talked about it before on the live streams, and I think I've mentioned it once or twice on the show before. I am planning a West Marches style campaign myself. The next campaign I run, which will be in my homebrew world of Primordia, is going to be adopting a lot of the methods and philosophies of the West Marches campaign. The West Marches is a style campaign that was run by Ben Robbins, the creator of the very popular games Kingdom and Microscope. And our discussion is coming from a series of blog posts that he wrote on a campaign he ran called The West Marches. I'll have a link to those blog posts in the show notes for this episode over at starwalkerstudios.com. And I definitely recommend, if you're interested in this, that you go read his blog post, because that is the source of information on this kind of thing. So this is going to be the first in a series of episodes on the West Marches. It's such a large topic to unpack. I didn't want to try to do it all in one episode. So today we're going to kind of talk about the basics of what is a West Marches campaign, what is it that kind of sets this apart from other campaigns. And then in future episodes, I want to talk about how to go about setting up and running one of these campaigns, as well as discuss some different ways that you could take elements of a West Marches campaign and use it in maybe a slightly different way, some different variations that you could try with these ideas. But before we get into all that good stuff today, I want to remind you that you can now get official Game Master's Journey t-shirts, coffee mugs, all kinds of good stuff over on our store on Spreadshirt. You can find a link to that in the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com. My wife, Nikki, spent a lot of time and work designing these t-shirts and things for us, and they're beautiful designs featuring the logos and artwork from Game Master's Journey and also my self-published adventure, The Trickster's Labyrinth. So it's a great way to support the show and show your support for podcasts, and this podcast in particular, and tabletop RPGs, the hobby, out when you're out and about by sporting some of our t-shirts. So thank you so much to Nikki for doing all that and getting that all set up. And I'm really looking forward to seeing these out in the wild. So if you get one of these products, I'd love to see a picture of you with it. So a picture of you in your Game Master's Journey t-shirt, perhaps. You can tweet that to me at Lex Starwalker. You can email it to me, gamemastersjourney@gmail.com, or you could post it to our Game Master's Journey community over on Google+. Also, my adventure, The Trickster's Labyrinth, is for sale on starwalkerstudios.com, and that is a D&D adventure for third level characters. So I hope that you will check it out. Well, we've got a lot to cover today. So without further ado, let's bring Christopher on board, and we're going to talk all about the West Marches. Christopher Ruthenbeck of the Sharkbone podcast is joining me again on the show today. Welcome back, Christopher. It's been a while, like a long time.
Yeah, it has. It's been too long. It's good to be back.
Yeah, so you were on a while ago on our episode on the social contract, and we had a lot of fun talking about that. And today you're coming back, and we're going to talk about Wes March's campaigns.
Well, that's what I was told.
Yeah. So first, I don't even remember if I asked you this, but have you played in or run one of these bad boys yet, or no?
I have not run one yet, but I did play maybe 3 sessions of one that a buddy of mine ran a few years ago. It was a Cypher System, the generic version, not Numenera or The Strange or anything.
Okay.
But and I was a magic using cowboy. It was kind of fun.
Awesome. Well, I haven't played in one, and I haven't run one either, but I'm in the process of planning one. So I guess we'll do some armchair quarterbacking today. And this is all very
Is there any other kind?
Not that I ever do.
Exactly.
So I've been threatening to talk about this on the show for a while now. So I figured I should finally do it.
About damn time.
Yeah, right. And I'm really glad that you're here to talk about it with me, because something we figured out as we started planning this is it's a pretty big topic. So this is probably going to be a series of episodes. God knows how many.
At least 2, if not much more.
Yeah. So, in case you don't know what we're even talking about, Wes March's is a style of campaign. It's pretty much associated with D&D, but it could be done with any fantasy game, and probably you could do it with any RPG, really.
Now that you start almost describing what it is, it makes me realize that I used to do this a lot in high school.
Okay.
Our gaming group was like 15 people, and
Nice.
Not everybody was in at the same time. So, we would have, so Wes March's basic idea is you have a large pool of players, 10 or more, and whoever can show up that day shows up. Their character's adventure. At the end of the adventure, everyone's back in town. Next time you get together and play, whoever's there, their players or their characters get together, go out and adventure, and at the end come back. So you're constantly just kind of rotating through the players.
Yeah.
And which characters are there. And that's kind of what we were doing. We would play AD&D. We would play D6 Star Wars. We would play most of the World of Darkness games. And it was very similar in style, that we just, whoever was available that day, hey, let's get together and play this campaign. Okay, I'll bring my character.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, that's a big part of it. And I guess, that's part of the reason I found this challenging to even approach as a topic, is there are kind of different elements of what makes a Wes March's campaign. And like you said, one of them is having this big pool of players. And I think at the very end of this conversation, whenever we get there, we'll talk about some different ways you could approach it, because you don't necessarily have to do it the exact way that Ben Robbins did it, who's the guy that came up with this idea. You could take bits and pieces of it and do your own thing with it. So yeah, that's one of the reasons I think it's such a kind of a big unwieldy topic. So Ben Robbins, the guy that kind of coined this term, Wes March's, he is the creator of the games Kingdom and Microscope. And
that I did not know.
Yeah. So, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but he recently created another game also. And so he seems much more involved with those things these days than the Wes March's anymore. But he did a series of articles on it on his blog, and we'll put those in the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com so you can check out the blog. And yeah, I mean, it's 4 fairly lengthy blog posts just explaining this. And I guess before we get too far into the details of how this works, we can talk about kind of why he decided to do a campaign this way. And he had basically 3 goals that he had when he did this. And the first was he wanted to, and this is coming directly from his blog, by the way, so you can follow along. He wanted to overcome player apathy and what he called mindless plot following by putting the players in charge of both scheduling and what they did in game. And so this is what you were just talking about, Christopher, where you had this pool of players, like more than could play at one time. And it was kind of up to the players to decide, you know, which of us are going to get together, when are we going to get together, and what are we going to do? And then another goal he had was to have a schedule that could adapt to the lives of adults. And this is one aspect of it that's really appealing to me, is that, you know, sometimes it can be hard to say, I'm going to play D&D every Monday at 6.
Yeah.
But if it can be more like, oh, hey, this week I'm free on Tuesday, who can play kind of thing, you might be able to play more. I don't know, at least theoretically.
Yeah. Well, I have my Shadow of the Demon Lord game I play on Thursday nights online. I have only 3 players, and we haven't played in like 3 weeks because someone was busy on game night and, you know, didn't have a large enough roster of players to say, hey, you want to bring your character in on this game?
Yeah. And there, I don't know. There's just so many problems. Like, you know, you have a good thing going and then, you know, a certain player can't make it, and you kind of plan things around that player's character, you know, and that's a real drag. Or, you know, you might have a player that they're really into it, but for, you know, their work schedule changes and for the next 4 weeks, they can't make it, but then they want to come back. And so this style of campaign kind of accommodates all of that. So you could have one player that's playing every week or multiple times a week. You could have another player that plays once in a blue moon, and it all works out. And then his third goal was, and I like this one too, to nip DM procrastination in the bud. So the idea is that the players decide where they're going to go, what they're going to do. And this avoids the thing, and I know I've done this, where the DM will just kind of keep putting off running the game until he feels like he's totally ready to run, you know?
I'm almost ready. I promise. Almost ready.
Yeah. So he says in his blog, he says it was gaming on demand. So the players created deadlines for me. So you might have the players get together and say, hey, we want to go explore the fairy forest this weekend. And so as a DM, you're like, oh crap, I better get that ready because, you know, we're playing Saturday now.
Yeah.
All right. So that's kind of why he came up with this thing. And it's kind of interesting because I don't think any one aspect of this is really new or unique necessarily, other than maybe having like that large pool of players. But a lot of the different aspects to this remind me of ways that we play D&D, like back in 2nd edition when we do like wilderness exploration and hex crawling and stuff like that.
Yeah, and really West March's campaign is a giant hex crawl.
Yeah, totally. So okay, so we can start talking more about like what is a West March's campaign. So the first thing, which we've already kind of talked about, is there's no regular party. So you have a pool of players, and he had like 10 to 14 players, but you could easily have more than that. And they're all part of the campaign. They all have characters. But as far as who's sitting around the table at a given session, it can change. So it's, you know, he was very much about having it be player directed. So the idea was that the players would decide, you know, like one player might be like, hey, you know, we saw that castle up on the hill. I want to go check that out. Who wants to come with me? And then that player puts together a group of other players, and they decide when they can play and when they want to play. And then they check with the GM, make sure the GM can be there. And
that's the important thing.
Yeah.
GM availability.
Yeah. The GM's got to be there. And then they get together and play. And so it puts, well, the first thing, it puts the scheduling, which is normally the GM's job, puts that in the hands of the players. It's up to them. So, if you don't play for 2 weeks, it's not the GM's fault.
Stupid lazy players, get on it. Come on.
Yeah. So, one session you might have one group of players, and another session you might have another group of players, but they're all involved in the same campaign, and there's continuity. They're all in the same place. So
yeah, it's kind of like every session is that crossover episode of your favorite superhero show or superhero comic.
Yeah.
Where you never know which heroes are going to be in it this time. It's Thor, Iron Man, and Hulk this time. Next week, it's Black Widow, Hawkeye, and I don't know, Supergirl, if we're going to cross Marvel and DC.
Why not? Let's do it.
Exactly. So it's always the good type of rotating door.
Yeah. Yeah. And it also allows for players to have more than one character if they want, especially if I think it works really well if they're different levels. But
see, I am so torn on the group being different level thing, because on the one hand, especially in the West Marches campaign, it makes a lot of sense, because if your character's not there, then you should come back in exactly how you left. But at the same time, if I haven't been able to play in a month or two, I come in, I'm 4 levels lower than everyone else. I'm not going to be able to do anything anyway, because I'm going to get one hit knocked out by pretty much anything that's a challenge to the other player. So why even bother continuing? So it's kind of, on the one hand, if you're not there, I don't know if you should be advancing in levels with everyone else. But the other hand, if you can't make it because you have this super important project at work that you've been working overtime to do, why are you getting punished when you come back to play games and have fun?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think part of what makes this work really well is, one, having lots of players. I think the more players, the better, as long as you can handle it. And two, if you have players that play multiple characters, and that's kind of what I meant by like different levels, is you have characters of different levels.
Gotcha.
So, you might have your character that's 4th level and everybody else is 8th level now, but maybe some new players come in and you can play with their characters, or maybe the other players have alts. They have other characters that they want to play that are more the level of the character that you want to play.
As a person who has maxed out 3 different servers in City of Heroes, alcoholism is real.
It is real.
It is a struggle.
It is a struggle. And, and this is one of the things that I kind of wonder if I would change when I run West Marches is he talks a lot about, for him, a big part of this campaign style is kind of this sense of friendly competition between the players, and kind of like what you're talking about. Like if you, for whatever reason, can't or don't play very often, then you're going to kind of get left behind in the leveling. And also a big part of this, which we'll talk about, is having some kind of community hub for all the players. And the idea is that they're exploring some unexplored part of the world together. And so when a group of players go out and they adventure and they discover something, the idea is they come back to town, and both in and out of character, they're telling all the other adventurers what they found, and and they're comparing notes, basically. So
look at this badass thing I did. Aren't you jealous?
Yeah. Yeah. And he said, it creates this sense of kind of competition, because the players that weren't there kind of wish that they were. And he saw that as a very good thing. So I don't know. I'd have to try it, I guess.
Well, better get on that. I'm waiting.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm working on a campaign like this. So yeah. So there's the way he did it, at least, there's no plot. It's very sandboxy. There's just this environment that you have to explore, and that's really it. There's not like an overarching meta plot, and the players and their characters decide where they want to go and what they want to do.
Yeah, and I think one of the speaking of meta plot, one of the important things to keep in mind as a GM who's prepping one of these is the players decide the meta plot. If you can come up with 2 or 3 or even 4 ideas of what could be something that ties everything together, but only drop hints about them here and there and see which ones your players latch onto, and that's the one that you should develop if you want an overarching meta plot. Because a lot of the Western Marches is all about players pushing for everything. The players decide when they're going to play. The players decide where they're going to go. The players decide who they interact with. It's all about the players, and the GM just describes what happens.
Yeah, totally. So a big part of this, of how this works, is some kind of community hub, which it seems to me like probably about the best thing for this would be like a forum that you set up. Mm-hmm. But you could also do it with a Facebook group or a Google community, or he did it with email lists, which is really old school. But you could probably make that work, or like a subreddit that would probably work. Mm-hmm.
And with that many people, it's usually a good idea to make sure that whatever platform you use, you're able to get notifications when it happens. If you have a forum, make sure that it sends you email notifications. Right. If it's a Google community, make sure you have the notifications turned on your phone, because if you have 15 people in there talking about what's going on, if you're not keeping track of what's happening, you're probably going to miss an invitation to a game you wanted to play.
Yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, you definitely want something that you can keep up on. And then the idea is that you use this for scheduling, so the mm-hmm. players use this to decide, when are we going to play next. And then they also share their discoveries and what happened on the adventure. So this is probably the biggest possible problem I see with this style of campaign. Is for it to really work well, it really relies on players doing like after adventure reports or after action reports, and getting on the forum or whatever you're using and actually writing out something about what they did, what they discovered, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If the players don't do that, it all kind of starts to break
falling
down.
Apart. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I've had a very difficult time getting players to even update their characters between sessions, let alone, post once or twice on a Google group or something, even though it's playing once, maybe twice a month.
Yeah, totally. So that I could see that being a problem if you can't get your players on board with keeping up on that. That could be an issue. So as far as how to solve that, I don't really know. The only thing I could think of was to do it on like a hangout or something, because I think maybe the players would be more willing to talk about what happened instead of write it. So if you could maybe get the players on a hangout and say, hey, just give me a recap of what you guys did, and then maybe put that on YouTube or somewhere where the other players could watch it. I don't know. But then you got to produce that.
No, all you have to do is have the player hop on YouTube and upload their video, and boom, that's it. You don't need to have it all pretty. You don't have to have intro music. You don't have to have any of those fade-ins.
Yeah, that's true.
Just have them hop on and be like, hey, look, this is what we did. This is the ass we kicked. This is what we ran away from, and be careful out there.
Yeah.
Because he was talking about, Ben Robbins was talking about how with the whole idea of having that little creative and playful competition between the players, part of it was part of the reason why every adventure would end in town was so that you could meet up with the other characters and brag about your exploits over drinks. Just take that to the next level, especially if you're doing like a more of a sci-fi or modern day game instead of a fantasy, which you can still do, especially sci-fi. The West Marches is just this expansive space no one's been to. Yeah. And then it is totally in genre to be like, hey, I'm posting this this as I'm placing this beacon that's broadcasting this message, talking about the dangers that I found and the possible rewards if you can, defy the danger and stay alive, or even just the equivalent of a recap of an adventure, just for, this is what we did, this is where we went, on like an adventurer's bulletin board or whatnot.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that's that's the thing with this, and a lot of the things in this is what's happening with the players kind of out of character is mirroring what's happening in world and character. So, the players are comparing notes, but their characters are comparing notes too at the same time. And
yeah, it's kind of an Inception thing going on.
yeah. And when they're on the forum planning their next adventure and seeing who wants to go and what character they want to take, in world, they're at the tavern or whatever, saying, "Hey, I'm going to go fight the witches on the hill. Who's with me?"
Yar, matey.
Yar. Yeah. So
I don't know why a pirate would be in there, but there you go.
Why not? The West Marches is on the coast. So
it's not marches, it's marshes. There's marshes all over.
There you go. Just got to change.
They're redneck hillbillies that think that they're they're pirates.
So he only had a couple like rules when it came to the scheduling. He said, obviously, like we've already kind of said, the GM has to be available to run the game at that time. And the other thing was that the players have to tell the GM where they're going in advance so that he has a chance to prepare whatever he might need to prepare. And the thing I also thought was interesting here is he says the GM can also veto a plan if he thinks it sounds totally boring and not worth a game session. So if for some reason the players decide to go somewhere and there's just nothing there, you could be like, yeah, you guys don't want to do that.
Or alternatively, if the GM has a few drop-in plot points just prepared, just have 2 or 3 in their back pocket, then, well, there wasn't anything there, but obviously the players want something to be there, otherwise they wouldn't go there. So here's this adventure that I had written up for whenever.
Yeah, totally. Just drop it in there. Blop.
Mm-hmm. Because, like we said earlier, the West Marches is all about exploration and pushing back the unknown to explore it. But until it's explored, it's Schrodinger's adventure site. It is both everywhere and nowhere until it interacts with the players.
Yeah.
And a little bit of plug is, if anybody is having problems coming up with random adventures like this, I would highly recommend listening to Pod Chatter episode 22 of the Sharkbone podcast, where we talk about using the sandcastle format for creating adventures. And it's just, I think it's a 5-step program. You start off with what's actually going on, your first major plot point, second major plot point, the hook that gets the players in, and then the potential adversaries that they might come across during the adventure. And then you just, I use Trello, and I just have a card for all of my adventure ideas. And when I'm like, oh, I need an adventure, what do I have written down? And it really doesn't take long once you start brainstorming. And I find having a set structure to be helpful, instead of like, oh, well, I want this to happen, but what about that? Or how about, it's like, no, these are the main points. Everything between the main points is up to the players. You're going from point A to point B. How they get there is up to them.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds like a good way to approach it. Anything that works, man. Sometimes you just need some kind of help,
Yeah.
So we've got, as far as like, how do you set this up? You've got your community for the players, whatever that is. You've got so the area, the West Marches itself, is, like we mentioned, it's an unexplored region. So like you said, Christopher, if you're sci-fi, that could be an unexplored region of space. If it's fantasy, it's an unexplored part of the world. And the idea is that it's on the very edge of civilization. So in Ben's campaign, it was the West marches. So you go west and it's unexplored. Who knows what's out there? And back east is, safety and civilization. And then you have a home base for the PCs in the form of a fortified town that's the last outpost of civilization and law at the edge of this frontier. And the idea is that if you can, at the end of every session, the player characters end up back at town so they can compare notes. And also so that the next time you play, you don't have to worry about, oh, well, I can't use this character because he's off in the hills. Everybody's, it like resets.
Make sure everyone's always at the same place. It's just like any TV show that you watch. The beginning and the end, there's shit happens in the middle, but the beginning and the end is status quo.
Yeah, totally. And I've even considered at higher levels giving the player characters some kind of basically like a Hearthstone that will teleport them back to the hometown.
Let's go old school. Scroll of Town portal.
Yes, totally. So that, if at the end of this, we barely get through whatever the thing is, it's like, well, we don't have to worry about how you guys get back to town. You just rub the magic lamp and you're back. But you don't want to do that too soon because, a big part of this style of play is the whole, human versus nature conflict, which is really important at low levels. As you get higher level, that's less and less of something you have to worry about. But
yeah, and especially at higher levels when you have access to teleportation magic.
Yeah,
not that big a deal. Or flight, for crying out loud.
Right. But with your low level characters, that don't have that yet, you don't want to give them the scroll of teleportation because that'll take out a big part of what they're supposed to be doing.
Exactly. But just, since we're going and talking about Diablo, well, I was anyway, because part of it is unexplored. And if we're going with the idea of it being a D&D game, it's probably was inhabited before. And so you might find teleportation circles randomly strewn about, in an abandoned keep that had fallen apart. After they clear the dungeon of the monsters, oh, look, there's a teleportation circle. We can now use this as kind of a forward operating base when we need to.
Yeah.
And then maybe they, find a way to teleport to it, once every, calendar month or something because they don't have teleportation magic yet, but they have the circle, something for them to work toward.
Yeah. I really like that idea. And the cool thing about the teleportation circle is they could even find that when they're low level, but it's no use to them yet. It's like their second level, they find a teleportation circle and they're like, well, this is really cool, but we can't use it right now. But when we're higher level, we know it's here and we can use it. So that'd be pretty cool.
And then that also gives them a reason to keep coming back to make sure that the monsters haven't reclaimed that site.
Yeah, totally. They have to defend it.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. So one of Ben's big guidelines, and this is one of the ones that I sometimes wonder if this might be something I monkey with when I do my own campaign, was one of his big rules was he avoided having any adventures happen in the town. The idea was that the adventure was out in the wilderness, out exploring, not in town. And he even went so far as to encourage you to avoid making too many interesting NPCs that the players would want to role play with. Yeah, he really didn't want the players spending time in town because he was afraid that if you gave them a bunch of interesting NPCs, that they would just spend all day in the town and they wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't go anywhere. So I wonder about that. I definitely, me personally, I don't enjoy running city campaigns and stuff, but if the players wanted to spend an entire session talking to an NPC in town, I wouldn't have a problem with it. They probably wouldn't get a lot of XP, but
right. Well, one of the things that that might be is just a sign of the times, because back then it was an email list. And so just keeping up with the email list is hard work when you have 15 people on it.
Yeah.
But nowadays, if you have a forum for, for communicating between game sessions, that would be a great time for your players to role play with these NPCs.
Right.
The dwarven berserker needs another axe, or the wizard needs some specific components for their spells. Yeah, you could just start the game, be like, hey, I'm spending 8 gold on whatever, and I have it. Or during the in-between times, you role play out on the forum, bartering with the NPCs and saying, hey, I need this. Can you get it? Oh, it'll take me a while. It's kind of a rare ingredient, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And especially if the forum has dice rolling capabilities, or, the GM could just roll the dice themselves, or you can trust the players to, on their system, be like, hey, this is what I got from my persuasion roll to get them to lower the price of the 800 gold piece axe I want to buy, or whatever.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's kind of how I think about it too. So yeah, I mean, everybody that takes this, we're all going to do our own things with it, probably.
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, for me, I think it's great to have the players have ties to the town that they're in.
Yeah.
Because one of the tricks that GM can pull out of their hat when they need to is, especially when for some reason you have all 14 players able to play the same night. Well, the monsters are tired of these adventurers coming from the town and wreaking havoc and killing their kin. They're going to attack the town, wipe it out. No more adventurers.
Yeah.
Well, now you have to defend the town, because the adventurers are in. The players themselves are invested in the NPCs, and they don't want to just leave them and go to the next town that just happens to be nearby.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we need to defend this town because Martha, the alchemist, is here and she makes the best tasting healing potions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or whatever.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if you're gonna do that, that's a great time to develop some NPCs if you haven't already.
Yeah, make sure the players have a reason to want to save the town before you put it in danger.
Yes, absolutely. And speaking of NPCs, now this is something I'm totally on board with. One of the ideas here is that the player characters, your whole pool of them, are the only adventurers around. So the NPCs in the area are not adventurers. And kind of his idea was that, and I'm kind of on board with this, was that adventuring is dangerous and kind of crazy. Like normal people would never do. Like, why would you do that?
It's literally going out seeking your death every time you leave.
Yeah. And the idea here is not only do you not have to worry about, oh, well, why are our characters doing this instead of some NPC, but it also, like, it's up to the players. There's no high level NPCs around that can help them out. There's, if they need to know something about what's going on in the wilderness, they have to go find out. They can't find someone in the town who's been there and ask them, kind of thing.
There's no Elminster to save your ass.
That's right. And there's no old man in the town that knows everything about the area that can answer all your questions for you.
Exactly, because it's all wilderness. No one's been out there. This town is as far as anybody knows about.
Yeah. And it's funny. So I'm preparing to run one of these because I really fell in love with this kind of campaign setup from the first time I read about it, and I've been wanting to do one. And this whole thing of needing to have this unexplored wilderness that nobody knows anything about, I want to do it. So it led to me having to change things about my setting so I could make it work. Because as it was, I was like, there's not, like, Primordia is really old and it's really well explored. Like, people would know what was where, kind of thing. Well, so I have to do something about that.
From what I remember, Primordia is old and it was well explored.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Until everyone decided to spend 4 or 5 generations inside the only handful of cities that are left.
Yeah. Yeah.
And over that much time, things change.
Yeah, and I've since added some things that will change things even more. So it will be believable that nobody knows what's out there anymore.
And especially with if GMs want to make changes to their settings, just a giant cataclysm that literally reshapes the face of the planet. Perfect. Because the players were adventuring over there just last week. Well, there was this giant geological shift, and now it's a desert instead of a giant ocean or something.
Yeah, totally. That's what I did. I've been rereading the Wheel of Time for like the 5th time, and I'm like, I want to have a breaking in my world. So that's what I did. I'm like, screw it. I'm going to break the world.
Breaking the world is awesome.
It is. It's much more fun than building it.
It's like Legos. You build it, then you drop it, then you see if you can put it back together again.
That's right. That's right.
This is Matthew Colville, and you're listening to Game Master's Journey.
I want to take a minute to give a quick shout out to the patrons of Starwalker Studios. The support of the patrons makes this show possible. If you enjoy Game Master's Journey and you'd like to give a little back, becoming a patron is a great way to do so. It's because of the patrons that all the listeners of Game Master's Journey enjoy a bonus episode every month, as well as the monthly Game Master's Journey live stream. I'd also like to give a huge shout out and thank you to my Tier 5 patron, Steve. Let's hear it for Steve.
Yeah.
Yes.
You the man.
Thank you so much, Steve, and thank you to all the patrons. You can find out more about becoming a patron by clicking on the Patreon button at the top of the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com. So you've got this wilderness, you've got this settlement that's fortified, and the idea is that it's safe there, because again, he really didn't want adventurers in the town. So it's a pretty safe place. Outside the walls of the town, though, anything goes. And then kind of the heart of the town, at least in his game, was a tavern. In his campaign, it was the Axe and Thistle. And the idea is this is where the adventurers congregate. And when the players are having their conversations on the forum or whatever you're using about what they're going to do next or about what they just did, that's kind of where it's happening, is at this inn or this tavern or whatever. And something that was super cool about what he did was he had in this tavern, there's this big wood table that previous adventurers had carved kind of a crude map of the area in the top of this table. And the players kind of really grabbed onto that. And so their characters, when they got back from an expedition, they would go to this table with this map and they would add to the map and carve into this table whatever they discovered that they wanted to add to the map, which I thought was super cool.
Mm-hmm. And part of the idea of that map is he was saying that everything is intentionally vague.
Yeah.
So he more describes. So he might have had an actual physical map that he would go off of, but he would never be like, oh, here's the region map and throw down a hex map. You're like, okay, what do you want to do? But it's more, okay, you traveled this many miles in this direction and this is what you see. And then, bringing up the old idea of having a group cartographer who would take what the GM describes and map it. So it'd be like, okay, over here-ish is this thing, over here-ish is that thing. Because until players get to be higher levels with spells that allow them to fly and actually see, or divination spells allow them to more accurately know where things are, the characters aren't going to know that, well, 2 hexes to the west and 1 hex south is what we're looking for. It's like, no,
Right.
it's southwest-ish over there, yonder somewhere.
Yeah.
Go find it.
Yeah, totally. And this is probably the aspect of this that really hooked me, that got me excited, was this idea of the map. And you could kind of approach this a couple different ways. You could do like you were saying, and you don't even give the players a map at all. You just describe things and they make their own map. And then, who knows how accurate that is or not. Or you could give them a map and have it be an actual, like, this is the actual map that your players or that your characters get somehow, like however they get it, and have it be an actual map that an NPC in the world created, and have it be really crude, and which is great because I can't draw or do maps, and have it be not reliable. Maybe things are, maybe it's not to scale. Maybe there are things that aren't where they're supposed to be on the map, or there are lots of things that aren't on the map that are out there. So it gives them, because he mentioned like having like for your first session, like basically giving them like a treasure map where you give them a map that's got like 1 or 2 or 3 like interesting sounding things on it. And it's like, pick one of those to go explore. And then you kind of go from there. But it's like the map is not, it's not 100% accurate. So, just because something's on the map doesn't mean it's actually out there, or doesn't mean it's where the map says it is. And so part of the job of what the characters are doing is they're adding to and refining this map of the area. And this is all the characters and all the groups kind of working together on this kind of communal map, which is really cool.
Yeah. And if you are like Lex or myself and you suck at cartography, there are lots of options out there for finding maps. 2 episodes ago, you were interviewing Mike Schley.
Yeah.
And you guys were talking a lot about cartography and maps and where to find like Cartographers Guild and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But just do a Google search for, forest hex map. And I'm sure there's a lot of people who are very good at making maps that have put stuff up there. And as long as you're not reselling it, you can use and reuse other people's stuff. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yep. And one point that he made is he would never, ever correct the players on anything to do with the map, whether it was an assumption that they made or they heard him wrong and put the wrong thing. It's like, that's part of the game, is trying to figure out where things are and what's going on. And so he would never correct them if they got something wrong on their version of the map.
Right. But if you are a perfectionist and anal about that kind of thing, and you actually are good at cartography, you make the map and you're like, hey, players, this is the local area that you know about. This is what you know is where. And just the characters don't quite know. So give them higher DCs, give them disadvantage on the first few times they're trying to find something. Use mechanical ways to represent how the characters don't know what's going on, even though the players know, oh, we have to go 2 hexes over here to get to the adventure point for this evening. But, the players get lost on the way, or the characters get lost on the way, and, you have a random encounter, or they come across something completely different.
Yeah. But personally, I don't think I'd ever show the players my GM map. That'd be secret. They'd never know. All they'd have is their crappy map they made themselves.
If I were to take the time and make a GM map, I would show that shit off and be like, look this is what I did for you guys. Respect my investment and do your job.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm passive aggressive, which you should never be as a GM.
Yeah, be full on aggressive. Don't be passive about it.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Be aggressive.
Be aggressive. Be aggressive. But only with your monsters, because if the players stumble into the CR8 area when they're only level 1 or level 2, That's part of West Marches.
Yep.
There might be, this is the level 1 area, this is the level 2 area, but it's not like there's a ring around the town that's level 1, there's a ring farther out that's level 2. It's no, this area over here has goblins. Goblins are Sierra 1/2, 1/4, whatever. It's easy for first level players for first level characters because they're goblins. But oh wait, just on the other side of the mound from the goblins is ogres. And you're still level 1, you don't want to go up against a family of ogres.
Yeah.
But if you do, that's why you have lots of alternate characters.
Yeah. So a really important part of this for the players and for the characters is information. And, this goes back to your community, whatever that is, and players sharing information, and their characters sharing information, but also, things like scouting and reconnaissance, because, and we'll probably talk about this more later, but he talked about, when you start like creating your zones of your area, and it's like, right by the town, you have a lower level zone, for the first level characters or whatever.
Yeah.
But
here's Atlas Park.
Right. But, he really recommended always having something in the area that was quite a bit more powerful than what was normally there. So it's like, there's just goblins around here, but, there is this one hill giant that lives nearby, and it's kind of like the players need to find out that the hill giant exists, find out where he is, and avoid him, and if they just blunder blindly and into the hill giant, then, well, they might be making new characters.
Yeah, and I think that's in my opinion anyway, that's one of the hallmarks of the West Marches style game, is that just because this is the adventure you decided to go on, just because this is the adventure that the GM has prepped for you tonight, doesn't mean it's the adventure you should go on.
Yeah. And I like that because and I've heard other people talk about this. It makes it more like when you're actually running the game, you can be more on the side of the players. And it's like, look, I've already decided what's where. You went into this hex. I already knew there was a red dragon there. Like, I can't change that. I'm on your guys. I'm trying to help you here, but there's a red dragon. What am I going to do?
Well, obviously, you're going to have them find a warren to crawl into that just happens to be the entrance to a mine shaft that has been since taken over by troglodytes. That's the adventure.
There you go.
Because they can't leave because they'll get eaten by a dragon. And that goes back to what I was saying before, is having a small number of non-location specific adventures you can throw in there. And then as soon as they encounter that dragon, you're like, oh, I have this troglodyte den adventure that I came up with a few weeks ago. Let's totally throw that in there. And then you mark it on your GM map because the players are going to mark here be dragons.
Yeah, right.
And here's where you hide from them.
So yeah, one of the themes is that the environment is really dangerous, which is why the NPCs aren't out there doing this. That's why the player characters aren't doing it.
Because they're the stupid ones.
And the PCs have to work together, and they have to think, and they have to be smart. They have to know when to run away, because not everything's going to necessarily be level appropriate, because it depends where they go. You might decide, oh, well, this forest is filled with really powerful fey creatures, and the PCs decide to go there when they're third level. And you're like, well, I hope they figure out pretty quickly that they're outmatched and before they get too deep into the forest.
Yeah. Otherwise, they might wake up 2 years later.
Yeah. So that's probably when
I would up at all.
I would probably throw an encounter with something really scary, like pretty soon when they entered that forest, so that they would know, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be here. Maybe we went the wrong way, guys.
The hex-based campaign design from Welsh Piper was done back in October 2009, but it basically it's a nice series of articles that helps you build out your own hex crawl map. especially for people who don't know how to, climate should go together, what terrain next to what. It's pretty simple. You start off with a primary hex type. You say this because the Welsh Piper has these, like in the DMG, talks about, you have your 1-inch hexes, you have your 1 mile hexes, the 6 mile hexes, and I think the 24 mile hexes for the 3 ranges.
Okay.
And Welsh Piper has hex maps that have hexes and hexes within hexes. So he does it 1-5. I think it's just 1 and 5. So each sub hex is 1 mile, and the big hex is 5 miles. So it would take a little bit of finagling to expand it just by 1 hex to make it fit the DMG suggestions. But you just you take one of your 1 mile hexes, like this is the primary type, and then roll on a table for, say you have this is plains, because it's a great place for a town because there's plenty of farming area, right?
Yeah.
Well, you roll on to see if it's you have, primary, secondary, tertiary terrain. Like, okay, nearby I've got this many primary, this many secondary, this many tertiary. I'm going to roll my D12 and look at where that falls on this table that he has. And it's like, okay, so this many hexes in this, or this many 1 mile sub hexes in this 6 mile hex is filled with plains. Here's, some forests, some hills, mountains, and just kind of put them where it would make sense. Move on to the next large hex, rinse and repeat.
Interesting. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. I think we should do a separate breakdown of that after we've both had time to read it, me to reread it. But it's a nice series of articles just telling you how to make a map.
Yeah, and we'll definitely link that in the show notes. And I will also link the blog that I talked about in the mapping episode that I found, where he made hex paper that's the scale in the DMG. So you could use that.
Oh, nice.
For this, if you want to do it on actual paper instead of doing it digitally.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll put those in there. Yeah, this looks really cool. And, sometimes you just need some inspiration. You're just like, what do I put in this hex? And this will, give you something to go from, Very cool.
Sometimes all you need is that seed for something to grow from.
Yeah. So, we're going to talk more later about, kind of the next part of this discussion is going to be, how do you set up and run one of these campaigns? And then what are some different variants you could try or different ways you could approach it. But, one thing I've been thinking about is I was just recently reading in, I can't remember if it's the PHB or the DMG, because I was wondering, I was like, how does mapping work in the game? Like what's involved? And the only real thing I found was in the section where it was talking about the different things that you can do while you're traveling over land. And it was saying that one of those is to make a map of the area. And it said that no roll is required. So me personally, as important as this is a part of the campaign, I think you should definitely require a roll for that, because you want there to be a chance that maybe they don't do very well. And so the map isn't quite accurate, which is just going to be more fun later when the next group comes in this area and find out that things aren't what they thought they were. And there is there's a tool, there's a cartographer's kit or cartographer's tools or something like that. So you could, decide what attribute that would go with. Right. Mm-hmm. And then if you have proficiency in that, then you get your bonus and you could roll that. So I
would probably go with intelligence.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like maybe once in a while you might use perception if it had to do with like being able to really see but yeah, it seems like intelligence would be kind of the go-to for that. Yeah, definitely.
And that's a very big underutilized skill in a lot of fantasy games, is knowing where the hell you are and how the hell to get back home.
Yeah. And it kind of makes sense that the wizard would be the one making the map, because he's already got paper and pens and stuff anyway, you know, he could be drawing it in the back of his spell book or whatever.
Yeah. Or if you're playing in a game like Shadow of the Demon Lord, where not everybody is considered to be literate, because you know, at the very first game you're level 0 dirt farmer, but the wizard is the one who is able to read and write everything that they know how to speak. And so, yeah, it makes sense that they would be keeping the map because they're the only one who knows how to write. This is a dragon's nest. Don't go here.
Yeah, totally. So there aren't, I don't think, a lot of backgrounds that give you the cartography tools proficiency. So one thing I've been doing to prepare for the campaign I'm running is making new backgrounds. So I made an actual cartographer background.
Oh, nice.
And I think there's one or two other backgrounds that I gave that proficiency to. So it's more likely that someone in the group will have it. and then some backgrounds will let you pick a tool, right? They'll be like, just pick a tool. So you could, you know, that might be a good thing to tell the players when they're making their characters is like, hey, cartography is actually going to matter in this campaign. So if you have a tool, that might be a good one for someone to take.
Yeah, because backgrounds, remind me again, they give you 1 skill and 2 tools, right?
2 skills and 2 tools.
2 of each?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like, you know, for example, a Wayfinder background, you know, cartography and, I don't know, like a trap kit or something.
Yeah. Or maybe navigation, which is more for like on ships, but could be useful. I don't know.
A lot of good options in there. Just one more tool in the tool belt.
That's right. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's the way I'm going to approach it is I was actually thinking about making a skill for cartography, but then I saw the cartographer's tool. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just use that.
Yep. A lot easier.
Yeah. Right. And survival is going to be a really important skill in a campaign like this.
Yes.
Being able to
nature.
navigate. Yeah. And live off the land and things like that.
Don't eat the poison ones.
That's right. And having a character in the group who's either a ranger or I think it's the Outlander background where you just automatically can find food for like 5 people when you're in the wilderness. Those will be great.
I'm assuming that you've seen Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yes, I think so.
Well, when Zuko and Uncle Iroh running away from the Fire Nation and they were on their own, this is either the flower of a blah, blah, blah plant that makes the most delicious tea, or it's deadly poison.
Yeah, exactly.
And you need a character who knows the difference.
Yeah.
Otherwise, at best, you're taking some levels of exhaustion as you're upchucking the meal.
Right.
At worst, you're sitting out for the rest of the game because you failed your save versus poison and you're slowly losing hit dice.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that nature skill is going to come in handy too. Yeah. And, you know, I'm usually, we'll probably talk about this more later, but I'm usually not one to do things like track food and water or track how much food did you bring for your horse or track ammunition beyond like 3rd level or something. But in this campaign, you probably want to think about actually doing those things in like actually using encumbrance maybe, because it's going to be at least
encumbrance.
Yeah, it's going to be at least at low levels. It's going to be part of the challenge and the danger because it's not just, you know, fighting the orcs or whatever you encounter, but it's, you know, not starving to death and having water and all that good stuff.
And speaking of bringing enough feed for your horses, it encourages players to actually do things like they used to do them. You wouldn't carry all of your gear with you. You would put it on your pack mule, on your horse or whatever, and you would walk while your horse carried the heavy stuff. And before you go in the dungeon, you know, you find a stream or something nearby and you lash them up to a tree and hope you come back before they get eaten by, I don't know, bugbears.
Or stolen by hobgoblins.
Yeah, see, there you go. There's your next adventure. Recover the horses, because when you're fighting troglodytes in the equivalent of the sewers, you're not going to find any gold pieces. So you got to go get your horse back. Otherwise, you're out the 20 gold or whatever it costs.
Yeah. And you're not going to have to worry about it forever, because as the characters get more powerful, they get access to spells like create food and water and teleport and fly. So it's really only going to be the beginning sessions that it's a thing. So, if you worry about it in the beginning, then later you won't have to. And it'll be another cool kind of milestone for the players when they can be like, oh, remember when we used to have to worry about food and water before the cleric could just summon it,
Yep.
Or remember that time we got lost before we had teleport?
Remember when we almost baked in the sun because we couldn't just fly over the desert?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, totally. So I think, because I know some GMs are going to be like, well, what's the benefit of tracking all that stuff? So I think the benefit is, then they get to enjoy the fact, because how often does the spell create food and water really mean anything? Like, I don't think I've ever used it as a player, So this would be a campaign that the character that gets that player is going to be like, oh my God, guys, I can create food and water now.
Yeah. And honestly, I have seen some pretty ingenious uses of those types of spells.
Yeah.
Last year at a Catacon, I ran an abbreviated, really quick one shot of Shout of the Demon Lord for some people who had never played. And I did like level 0, level 1, all within, a 2 or 3 hour time slot.
Okay.
And one of the players decided to be a magic user, and a level 1 spell was, Summon Feast, which is pretty much designed to remove the need to track food and water.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the adventure was revolving around rat men in the sewers. And so I had the climactic battle all set up. There was this giant rat man. He had 2 Rottweiler-sized giant rats, and there were like 4 or 5 swarms of rats. I'm like, yeah, this is going to be great. They're going to go out fighting. Everyone's going to die. It's going to be awesome. And then the one player's like, I summon Feast over there. I'm like, all of the rat swarms go running over to the food.
Brilliant.
And the other guy's like, I'm going to Burning Hands all of them because they're right there. I'm like, well, there goes that adventure.
Yeah, right. I love it. I love that stuff. That's great.
And that player, I think that was either Michael or Kendall from Redemption, if you listen to that. And because there were 2 players who were new to D&D, or new to role playing in general, and so he wanted to make sure that they had the spotlight. So he took the stupid spells, and I'm using air quotes. And he's like, I took this because I didn't think it would come in handy. And it pretty much bumps that spiked for the other players, the newer players who took all of the flashy, fancy, death dealing spells. It's like, yeah, I summon a feast and we roast everybody.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I love it when players can do something creative like that. And I love it when like it can actually mean something. I was running the Hidden Shrine, and there's this like poison gas everywhere that basically prevents them from resting because they take damage every hour. And Steve, who's playing a wizard, decided they found a relatively small room that they could seal, and decided to try to use a gust of wind to like blow all the poison gas out so that they could rest. And it was awesome. I was like, that's awesome.
I remember listening to that.
And that's another spell that like, when is that ever useful?
Once.
Yeah, pretty much.
That kind of, I know we're completely tangenting,
that's all right.
but that's a hallmark of Sharkbone Podcast. So I figure, what the hell, I'll keep going. I was listening to a podcast a long time ago about 4th edition D&D. It was the official WotC podcast, and they were talking about the tone of magic items and how they took out a lot of the crazier items like the deck of many things or cursed items and whatnot. And he said something that, really made a lot of sense is that, yeah, sure, you have a 1% chance of getting this item on the table. So what's the likelihood that it will, the overpoweredness or the crazy negative downsides will upset the balance of your campaign? Well, the answer is 100% of the time it gets rolled.
Right.
So it's only a 1% chance of it happening, but as soon as it happens, 100% guaranteed to fuck up your game. So do you really want something that ungodly powerful or a curse that is that horrible that a player would rather kill their character than keep playing?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, like the deck of many things. That's a often culprit of that.
Right. And so like how often does Gust of Wind get used in such a creative 100% of the games that it's used in?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So yeah, it's great anytime, a player can find a creative way to use a spell that makes sense and isn't ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one of those GMs that will just let the stupidest ideas fly because the player came up with them.
I'm going to use Gust of Wind to empty all of the poison from this room. Well, you realize there's no door, right? It's okay. We'll rest. No, the fog comes back in.
Yeah. I got in a very heated argument once with a player long, long ago about what I call cartoon physics.
Oh, jeez.
And I was like, just because it works on the Roadrunner doesn't mean it's going to work in my D&D game.
Roadrunner. Meet.
Yep. Yeah, and his thing was kind of like, it's D&D, it should work, who cares? And my thing was like, there's got to be some level of realism here. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
All right.
It has to pass the does it make sense test.
Yeah, totally. So we came up with some benefits of this, like why you might want to do this, one of these campaigns. So you want to take turns on these, Christopher? Since we got a nice list here.
You do odd, I'll do even.
Okay. I like being the odd one. So
don't we all?
So first benefit that possibly of this is it encourages players to take responsibility of scheduling sessions off the GM's shoulders. So I think not only is this good because you don't have to do it, but also, it could help with player engagement and buy-in if they're taking, more responsibility for making things happen.
And it also helps them, the perpetual players, to understand the frustrations that GMs get when they try to schedule a session. People are like, yeah, whatever, we'll do it later. It's like, no. And then they finally understand.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Second benefit is that players get to decide where they go and what they do, because there's a big stereotype of railroad bad.
Yeah.
And even if it's, because really the freedom of choice is an illusion, let's face it.
Yeah.
Yes, they get to choose where they go, but no, they don't get to choose what they do. The GM already has that area mapped out. They know, they have an idea of what type of adventure is going to happen there. So the only choice is, do we do it now or later? Which is still a lot better than follow my railroad because it's important.
Yeah. I've definitely played in a campaign where I'm like, wow, I've played this character quite a while. And now that I look back, I feel like I never got an opportunity to do what I wanted to do. I was always following the GM story and never really had a chance to be like, my character is going to go do this thing because he wants to. So yeah, with this kind of thing, the players totally get to decide what they're going to do. And, there's really only one downside to that. And that's that the players get to decide what they're going to do.
It throws a wrench in my plans, man. Come on.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, but I definitely, I like his idea to start it off with the little treasure map because, I think one problem that can happen with like a more Sandbox style campaign like this is getting it going. Once you've got momentum, then you're good. But if you don't have something in the beginning to kind of give the player some kind of direction, sometimes they spend like half the session arguing about what they're going to do. So
yeah. It's easy to plant story seeds for later when the players give you opportunities, but until they get the ball rolling, you're just kind of waiting. So yeah, give them like 2 or 3 things to, choose your own adventure. Yeah. Do you want to turn to page 5, turn to page 20, or page 86?
Yeah, totally. I mean, kind of what I'm leaning towards. It's funny. I told you I wasn't going to show the players my map, but I guess I kind of been planning on it because I was wanting to have a map with a bunch of really cool sounding things on it, and it's like, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? I just planned for this map to be very untrustworthy. It won't be the real GM map. It's actually to scale and true.
Yes, but it's good enough for government work, right?
Right. And it gives you some idea of what's around, or at least what people think is around.
Yeah.
And, so I've been having fun with that. Just coming up with names of locations that sound cool, like the fairy forest. That's one. Like super generic, but I'd go there.
I would be hesitant.
Well, yeah, I'd be scared to go there, but I'd want to go there.
As a player, I read the story. Fae are capable. I would not want to go there until I was at least level 8.
Yeah, right. Have some kind of resistant to enchantment and charm going on or something.
Yeah.
Oh, man, where are we? Whose turn is it?
Number 3. It's all
that's
you.
Me. I'm odd. Player choices matter, and it's much more the players versus the world than the players versus the GM. So yeah, I mean, that's going to come down to kind of how you do it and how you run it. But at least the way Ben did it, he decided what was in, given hexes, and then he had random encounter tables for different areas that he came up with. And he even went so far as to often, or I think always, roll in the open. He didn't use a GM screen. So it was kind of like how the dice fall. I'm a big fan
of rolling in the open.
Yeah, I think for this kind of thing, and
especially for this, yeah,
and it helps that, right? Because it's like, I didn't crit on you, the ogre did, the die did.
It's right here, you saw it happen.
Yeah, and then you don't. I found you don't feel quite as bad, like especially when you like kill a player character. If you're rolling in the open and everybody saw it, it's like, hey, that it's what it is. But I at least I feel like I feel more bad if I'm rolling behind the screen, because I'm like, well, what if they think that I cheated, or or I guess what it really is I think, what if the player's like, well, why didn't he fudge it for me? Right? Like, why did he actually kill my character? He's rolling behind the screen. He could have fudged it. We would have never known. Why didn't he? He hates me.
And that's one of the major reasons why I do all my rolling in the open. Once you even give the impression that you might be fudging, then players will start expecting it. But if it's all out in the open, and my jamming style, before players even picks up the die, I let them know, hey, this is your difficulty number. Here's the AC of the monster. Here's the DC of the check before you even roll. So you roll the die. You tell me, did you hit or not? Did you succeed or fail? And that way there's no, well, make a check. Oh, it's a 13. Well, I was going to make it a 15, but I really want him to succeed, so I'll lower. It's like, no, here's the numbers. Here's everything all out in the open.
Yeah. Now the possible downside of that is then you can't fudge, right? So if something happens that you really don't want to happen, like a character is going to die, you're kind of, if you step in, it's going to be obvious what you're doing. You have to do something more, which this is kind of what I'd be more prone to do anyway. Do something more in world, like suddenly an NPC shows up, or their deity like blesses them or something.
And I think this is kind of a discussion for another topic, because man, I could go on forever about ways of getting around that.
Yeah, that's a can of worms. We'll have to can of worms that.
Yep. Put a pin in it. We'll come back to it.
Yeah, but part of West Marches is that it tends to be deadlier. you know, and especially at lower levels, you know, the players should be prepared for character death, like being a real possibility. So
right.
there you go.
And speaking of character death,
Yes.
it another benefit is that it accommodates a larger pool of players and player characters than you would normally do in a single group.
Yeah.
You know, most people are comfortable in the 3 to 7 range. You know, me personally, I like either 3 or 5. Don't give me any of that even number crap.
Oh, that's interesting.
When the players are trying to decide what to do, I don't want there to be 3 people saying go left, 3 people saying go right.
Ah, that's a good point. Yeah.
If there are 5 characters, if there are 5 players, 3 characters can say go left, they're going left.
Yeah.
It keeps the action going.
Yeah, this is really appealing for me because I do the podcast and I stream some of my games on YouTube. So I always get people wanting to play in my games and more people than I can accommodate. And, that's one of the reasons I want to do one of these campaigns is I'm thinking someday in the future, maybe I could have like that big pool of players and more people that could play. Of course, that would require me being able to run more than once a week, which right now probably isn't realistic, but
well, you need to quit your job and become a full-time game master and everybody $5 each session.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, as soon as those checks start coming in, I will do that. I would happily do that.
Because I mean, let's take a look at it. You're paying what, $10, $12 for a 2-hour movie?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's just if you get the ticket. If you get popcorn, you're paying like $30.
Right. So for a 3 or 4 hour game session, $5 sounds great.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's a deal.
And then as a GM, you have, 5 players. That's $25 for 4 hours of work. Not too bad.
Yeah. Until you start factoring in the prep time.
Bah, humbug. I don't prep. I make shit up as I go.
Which I don't know if this is on our list or not, but that's another benefit of West Marches. It's very front loaded. There's a lot of prep at the beginning, but once you get going, it seems like it's kind of less and less,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. We might get to that. That might be one of our things. We're odd now again, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. You can run games more often as scheduling is less of an issue. So I'm not in this situation right now, but I've definitely been in the situation in the past where I could have run multiple games every week, but I just couldn't because not all the players could do it, So
yeah, I think we've all been there.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you've got like 30 players and you're like, hey, as long as 4 of you can show up, we're doing this, you could play a lot.
Yep. That's what, 12% of the of your player pool?
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
That's not too shabby. Yep. It focuses a lot of the exploration and combat pillars, and let's face it, a lot of the class features and stuff for rangers and druids and spells that have to do with exploration are usually just kind of pushed by the wayside.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a lot of untapped potential in my experience, and I haven't played with a lot of different groups, so I might just be the groups that I've stuck with for all these years, but it's usually combat and social interactions, and the exploration is like, no, this world's been, like Primordia before it collapsed. It's a big world, but it's old and it's been explored and everyone knows where everything is.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of room for exploration, but West Marches is specifically about the exploration.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let my rogue actually be a scout, damn it.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing I really liked about Pathfinder, I ran some of their adventure paths, and they would have these player's guides for the adventure path that would go through all the classes and kind of give you some thoughts if you're making a character like this class would be really great in this campaign, or this class wouldn't be great in this campaign. Or if you're playing this class, think about taking these spells. And so I'm kind of doing that for this. And I'm like, Druid Ranger, this is the campaign. If you wanted to play a Druid or a Ranger, this is the one to do it in, because you'll actually get to use your stuff.
Yeah. This is the way to go.
Or yeah, like the scout type rogue. Like, or like you want to be like an Outlander or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, for me, most of the time I play, I'm either a wizard or I either do a wizard or a scout. I'm sorry, a wizard or a rogue.
Uh-huh.
But my rogue is never the backstabby, steely, chaotic, neutral character. It's usually a scout or a ninja type who just is sneaky and very good with small weapons.
Yeah, that's cool.
Great for exploration, but everyone's like, "Oh, you're a rogue. You're gonna steal my stuff. I'm not gonna trust you." I'm like, "No, my class is rogue, but I'm an explorer."
Yeah, yeah, totally. All right, I think it's my turn again.
Yes,
it's great for players who want a quote fair game where they succeed or fail based on their decisions, and of course some luck. But it's all on them, and. You can even go all the way and roll in the open and everything else. And, I kind of, as a player, that's what I like. I don't like it when I feel like the DM's like taking it easy on me.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't like it if I feel like the DM's like just being a jerk. Like, I've never actually had that happen. I don't think I have actually.
Oh, I had one, maybe two GMs in the past that were specifically antagonistic and out to get us, and that's no fun.
Yeah, that wouldn't be fun.
Make sure the world is out to get us, but the GM is for us.
Yeah, I agree.
Another benefit of West March's style game is a great way to run a sandbox or to do an actual campaign that combines story-driven elements as well as the free-form nature of a sandbox game.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure we've all been like, "Oh, I'm totally going to run a sandbox game. Great." But then like 3 adventures in, nothing has been done. No one's going anywhere. And it's like, this is lame. Let's play Star Wars instead.
Yeah. Something I've been kind of thinking about this is, and I don't know, I haven't run one of these yet, but I feel like this is a great campaign for low level and mid-level, but maybe not so much high level. It seems like there come a point where the PCs would just kind of out-level this kind of campaign, and it'd just be like, we'll send our minions to explore. Like, we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah, and that could be a great way to, restart in the same world once your characters get to like 13th level or something, and they start dominating everything, and it's getting boring.
Yeah.
Well, their exploits had trickled back down to civilization, and a new group of adventurers, fresh level 1s, come to a nearby but far enough away that they can't just run to the old PCs for help when they need it. But because the player characters have pushed back the darkness and pushed back, and they've explored all this area, well, now there's new wilderness to explore.
Yeah.
And you have this fresh crop of level 1s that are coming in exploring this new area.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I don't see this on the list, but another benefit is, and this is another reason I'm doing it, is it's a great way to kind of flesh out an area of your world.
Yes.
So as the players explore, you're kind of filling in the details, and then they keep expanding out, and it's very organic.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do with my Shadow of the Demon Lord game.
Cool.
Because a lot of games that I've played in the past was you start in your starter city and then you leave back.
Yeah.
But I've had the past 2 adventures in the same city. And, I've been having, whenever the players ask, well, is there this kind of person there? Like, okay, yeah, there. Okay, what are they like? And so the players are helping me to develop this town that they're in. And so it's nice to not have to come up with a new town every single session, because the players are always on the move. It's like, no, the adventures are happening around this one specific spot. Get to know it very well because you're going to be here for a while.
Yeah. And then they also get to enjoy being like celebrities and heroes in the town,
Exactly.
Because it's like, how often do you have like that first level adventure or whatever, and you become heroes of the town, and then, like you said, you leave and never go back again.
And if you only have the one chance to be a hero of a town, if you ever decide to come back, they're like, oh yeah, I kind of remember you. But if you're there for 3, 4, 5 adventures doing awesome things, they're going to give you a freaking statue in town square.
Yeah, right. totally. Love those mutters.
Exactly.
And another benefit is that players that want to can have multiple characters in the campaign and play different characters. I've definitely had players like this where like every week they've got some new character concept they want to play. So this would be a great campaign for someone like that.
Or great campaign. Me personally, I'm an altaholic, but that's because I like to GM, because when I GM, if I want to play a specific type of character, well, they just happen to be in the next adventure. And it's still the same storyline, the same main characters, but I get to play whatever the hell I want to.
Yeah.
When I'm a player, I'm like, oh, I really want to get to the next level so I can get this cool power. But, oh, look at that. That character type looks even cooler. I should try that for a while, and then I'll come back. But you don't usually get that opportunity. Usually in a campaign, you start and end with the same character unless they die.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Which, granted, could happen.
Yes, definitely could happen. So it's definitely not a campaign for every player or for every GM, but might be just what you're looking for, or didn't know you were looking for. That was me. I wasn't looking for this, but when I found it, I was like, this sounds awesome. Because
and maybe it's not what you're looking for, but bits and pieces of it are.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's like you said, Christopher, I feel the same way about the exploration pillar, that it tends to get overlooked. And it's a part of the game that I really enjoy. And, I've been looking for ways to feature it more and make it more important. And I found this and I was like, well, this is kind of just built around that.
It's all about the exploration.
Yeah. Now a downside, I don't remember if we mentioned this or not, is social interaction, not so much. So that's
honestly though, I see that as a problem with the GM and not with the Western Marches, because you can totally have the episode like we're watching a TV show, the adventure where you set out to explore the collapsed castle, see what's in there, and you come across a goblin den.
Yeah.
Well, the goblins plead for your help. They plead for mercy. We'll leave, but we couldn't find any place else to go. And you can open up a dialogue and have an interaction with the goblins. Be like, oh, hey, you're here where we want to be because you got kicked out of your place. Well, let's go, play negotiator. And so you can totally do interaction pillar with West March's game. You just have to remember that just because they're not PC races doesn't mean that they're always evil.
Right. Yeah, totally.
And I think that's just something that's been so ingrained in the gamer mindset that if you see an orc or a goblin, you kill it, you gain XP, you don't talk to it.
Yeah. But
you totally should.
Yeah, and as a GM, I'd love to go against type with stuff like that. I'd love to have... Oh my God, when I think this was part of the adventure as written. I don't remember if this was part of the adventure or if I added it. But when I was running Tyranny of Dragons, the player characters met this young green dragon. And instead of having the green dragon just fight them, I had it like trying to make a deal with them. And it was offered, like it was making a very reasonable sounding deal. And it was so great because it was actually the kind of thing you were talking about. The party split almost perfectly down the middle, where half the players wanted to take the deal, thought it was a great deal, and they were like, why fight this dragon if we don't have to? We can both benefit from this. And the other half was like, this dragon's evil. I don't trust it. We're not taking the deal. And they argued about it, and like one of the characters like left in a huff, and like it created all this like conflict in the party. And it was just fantastic. I loved it.
Yeah. Number one most underutilized tool for any GM or DM is to have the monsters open a dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then the empathetic players or the good aligned characters will be like, oh, they want to talk things out. I can't just kill them now.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, totally. And yeah, if you get really lucky, the players start arguing about whether to do what it says, or even if not, you get to role play a little bit and have some fun.
Yeah. Even if you end up fighting the dragon in the end, you still had that role play moment. And the bard, with their massive persuasion check, was able to, convince the other player characters, this is why we have to kill the dragon.
Yeah.
And it also shows you why the barbarian should, multi-class into rogue, so they can take persuasion as a trained skill, because they're tired of never being able to get their way. Well, that's because your barbarian's dumb and can't speak good.
That's right. Speak gooder. Come on, get it right. If you spoke gooder, things would go gooder,
Speak more gooder.
Yeah. And there's obviously the kind of weaker opponent who doesn't want to die. And so they try to make a deal. But I think even more fun, or as much fun, is the very powerful opponent that, for whatever reason, wants to make a deal, like probably because they think they can use the player characters for some scheme or something. And it's a thing where the players are like, we don't really know if we could take this guy, this red dragon that wants to make a deal. Maybe we should listen to him, and then we don't have to fight him. And then, that's the way you can get them under that NPC's thumb and have all kinds of fun.
If I'm allowed to tangent once more into a gaming story.
Sure.
When I was running 4th edition, this was pretty soon after it came out. I think I was running Keep on the Shadowfell.
Okay.
And that was like the first time I'd ever run a pre-written adventure. And there was a goblin that it was written in the adventure that if the players, parlayed with it, he would surrender and, become a servant to the players and follow them around and such. So I was playing this goblin, Splug, I think was his name.
Good goblin name.
Yeah, good goblin name. And Splug was always talking like a goblin. Splug is willing to help. What can Splug do? And so this was like when 4th edition first came out, and even, I guess you wouldn't know because you never played, but the Beastmaster Ranger didn't show up until PHB 2. And so when PHB 2 came out, one of our players is like, I've been a ranger and I've been waiting for this. Can I have Splug as my animal companion? And so we role played him training with Splug, teaching him how to fight and everything. And as soon as the PH2 dropped, he changed from 2-weapon fighter ranger to Beastmaster Ranger, and his quote unquote animal companion was this goblin that the party saved or decided not to kill 5 or 6 levels prior.
That's hilarious.
So you never know what could go well if you parlay with the humanoids, at least for a little while.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think you can, if you kind of realize, the social tier could kind of take a back seat in this, and you're kind of on the lookout for ways to bring it in, I think you can. Just got to make a little effort. Use more intelligent monsters maybe in the wilds that might make a deal or whatever, and maybe don't be so hesitant to actually use the NPCs in the town and do stuff with them too. Why not?
Yep. And always give them ulterior motives.
Yes.
You're fighting bad guys. Well, why are they here fighting?
Yes.
Why didn't they just run away?
And even the good guys should have agendas.
What is their motivation?
Just make it all gray. Even the good guys have agendas. Let's Game of Thrones this bitch.
Miller sends you off to, fight the Undines in the river. Well, because the Undines are causing the river to run slower and his mill's not going as fast. So being as how he saw you fight off whatever just outside of town, he figured you could kill him. Well, yeah, but why don't you just talk to the Undines, have them move farther upstream or something?
Yeah, right. Awesome. Well, I think that's enough for today. We've got a lot more to talk about though. So basically today we've just kind of told you what the West Marches is, and we still want to talk about things to think about if you're thinking about running one of these campaigns, how to set one up, and also some different things you can do with it, because there's a lot of aspects to this, and I think that you could be really successful using some of them, but not all of them if they don't all appeal to you. So maybe you don't want to have a pool of 10 to 15 players or whatever. You could still do this kind of thing, I think, and have a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. So we've got a lot more to talk about. So Chris, you're going to come back, right? And we're going to hit this again and again.
Try that one more time. What's my name?
Christopher.
There you go.
What did I say? What did I say?
You said Chris.
Oh, okay. Well, at least I was close. I'm like, what did I call you? Something like really bizarre? Like Xanadu or something?
That's not bad either. But yeah.
Christopher. Yeah. So, sorry, I'm a little low on sleep today.
That's all right. It's 9:00 my time, so I can understand.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah,
I'll definitely be back unless you don't want me.
No, I don't want to do this all by myself. This is a lot of stuff here. So yeah, we'll get back into it in the next episode and talk more West Marches.
Sounds good to me.
All right, well, that is going to wrap it up for episode 166 of Game Master's Journey. If you'd like to get a hold of me, please visit the website starwalkerstudios.com. There you can email me, find my Twitter, Google+, Facebook, Pinterest, and YouTube information. You can find the Trickster's Labyrinth. You can find a link to our store over on Spreadshirt where you can get a Game Master's Journey t-shirt. And you can also find the Game Master's Journey voicemail number where you can call and leave me a message. If your question or feedback is entertaining or enlightening or both, you might even hear your message on the show. If you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions for future topics, I'd love to hear from you. You can also find a link to the Game Master's Journey community where you can share ideas with other listener GMs. Finally, you can learn about how you can support the show by becoming a patron, by making a one-time donation, by using my Amazon referral link when you shop on Amazon, by purchasing a Star Walker Studios t-shirt, or by purchasing my D&D adventure, The Trickster's Labyrinth. You can find all this and more at starwalkerstudios.com. I hope you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week. I hope you have a chance to run your favorite RPG. I'll be back soon with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on.
This has been a Star Walker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music, courtesy of Cloudwalker, Transboy, Renfield, Stanko, and Ish. See the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/GameMastersJourney.